A 10-year-old legal battle between the South Korean government and an American private equity firm comes to an end. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes ordered Seoul to pay some $216 million to Lone Star. From September 3rd, people departing for South Korea won't have to take a PCR test before traveling. In Q4, the so-called bivalent vaccines will be introduced. Various restrictions related to travel and family gatherings will be lifted during Chuseok. South Korea's National Security Advisor is set to hold talks with his American and Japanese counterparts. Meaningful discussions on trilateral cooperation with North Korea and other issues are expected as the security situation on the peninsula is very serious. Hello, it's good to have you with us at this hour. I'm Daniel Che, here to bring the latest. Let's begin with the top story at this hour. A decision was handed down by the arbitration body of the World Bank on a decade-old legal dispute between the South Korean government and Lone Star. The government owes the American private equity firm some $216 million for interfering in the sale of KEB to another local bank, less than 6% of what Lone Star initially claimed. Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
$216.5 million out of a claimed $4.68 billion. That's what the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, or ICSID, says South Korea owes U.S. private equity firm Lone Star. Less than 6% of what Lone Star wanted, but South Korea's Justice Minister Han Dong-un says the amount is still unacceptable.
The government will be going over a response, including an annulment request. The government will do its best. Not a dime of our precious taxpayers' money can be wasted.
This was a decision made by the World Bank arbitration body, which decided that South Korea had deliberately delayed the transaction process and denied the American private equity firm more profit. This is a decade-old dispute. In 2012, Lone Star Funds filed a complaint for an investor-state dispute settlement saying, first, South Korea purposefully delayed the sale of Korea Exchange Bank to HSBC in 2007, which led to the deal falling through. Second, South Korea taxed Lone Star unfairly, going against treaties made between South Korea and European nations. Third, South Korea delayed the process of KEB sales to Hana Bank back in 2010, ultimately lowering the final price. South Korea said its financial regulatory agency treated all transactions by Lone Star fairly and that all the delays were due to the allegations against the fund for stock manipulation and other potential criminal activities. In the end, the three-person tribunal panel unanimously dismissed the first two claims, but for the last one, two of the three accepted Lone Star's claim. However, the nation's highest court said in 2012 that Lone Star, in fact, is guilty of illegally meddling with Korea Exchange Bank's credit card division. That's why a partial amount was granted, $216 million.
Seeing that the tribunal's minority opinion fully accepted our government's claim, denying any responsibility, we see a reason to take this to the very end.
Both South Korea and Lone Star have 120 days to call for an annulment. The requesting part needs to prove certain procedural or due process failures of the tribunal panel. That means it won't be relitigated at a higher court, unlike a lawsuit. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's net terms of trade index for goods fell in July to its lowest on record. This comes as the cost of imports outpaced the price of exports, due in part to rising global oil prices. According to the BOK, the index for the value of exported goods rose last month by 8.1% on-year to 143.16, marking 21 straight months of spikes. That was driven mainly by coal and petroleum products and transportation equipment, but the index for imported goods rose much more to just over 182.5. That brought the terms of trade index down by 11.4% to 82.55, the lowest since the figure was first compiled in the late 1990s in the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis. To help boost exports, President Yoon announced more than $250 billion in trade financing. The government will also focus on ensuring that Korea's logistics systems are the best in the world and help exporters win deals to build infrastructure overseas. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
South Korea is doing all it can to shore up exports and overseas construction projects. This was President Yoon Suk-yeol's main focus at a weekly economic affairs meeting on Wednesday at Busan New Port in the city of Changwon. The president has vowed to remove hurdles for exporters as fast as possible.
우리나라는 대외 의존도가 세계에서 가장 높은 나라고 우리 국민들이 한마디로 수출로 먹고 사는 나라입니다. 그래서 이런 물류 시설과 시스템을 세계 최고 수준으로 우리가 정비하고 유지를 해 나가야 됩니다.
For that, there will be record levels of trade financing for exporters worth 351 trillion Korean won, or some $261 billion US dollars. At the same time, the government is looking into cutting more red tape for businesses. Korea also aims to strengthen its competitiveness for overseas construction projects targeting markets in the Middle East, Asia, and Central and South America.
수주 지역의 다변화뿐만이 아니라 건설 공사를 매개로 해서 교통망, 5G 등 이런 것들을 전부 패키지화해서 수출하는 새로운 전략적 시도가 필요합니다.
Yoon will continue with his sales diplomacy, hoping for another overseas construction boom, citing recent deals with Poland and Egypt for arms sales and the nuclear power plant project, respectively. Meanwhile, Seoul aims to manage trade relations with Beijing, seeking more cooperation in ICT and green industry amid a recent decline in exports to China. While chip prices are falling, officials say high energy prices also remain a concern, responsible for Korea's month-long trade deficit. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Seoul's trade minister conveyed concerns to the U.S. ambassador that the Inflation Reduction Act likely violates FTA. Lee Chang-yang met on Wednesday with Philip Goldberg and told the envoy that the new law is discriminatory, and also expressed concerns about the negative impacts of the law, which eliminates tax benefits for EVs built outside of North America. The minister stressed that Seoul is taking this very seriously as it works to strengthen bilateral trade relationship and makes huge investments in the states. He added this can be resolved through in-depth discussions and asked the U.S. to take active part in the talks. Meanwhile, the South Korean delegation expressed concerns over the Inflation Reduction Act. In their first round of formal talks on the issue, the U.S. side emphasized the two countries' strong trade alliance and vowed to stay in touch with Seoul on the matter. Kim Dami shares with us what was discussed.
South Korea and the U.S. have kicked off formal talks aimed at minimizing the impact of the Biden administration's newly adopted Inflation Reduction Act on South Korea's electric vehicle industry. Officials from the South Korean Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Finance on Tuesday requested that the U.S. Trade Representative and Commerce Department revise the bill and delay its enforcement until 2025. By that time, South Korean automaker Hyundai Motor is expected to have completed the construction of an EV plant in the U.S. That will make buyers of its vehicles eligible for the U.S. tax credit of $7,500, which the Inflation Reduction Act eliminates for cars assembled outside of North America. Led by An Sung-il, head of the Trade Ministry's new Trade Order Strategic Bureau, the South Korean delegation will be in the D.C. until Wednesday, reaching out to officials at the Treasury and State Department. Regarding Tuesday's initial meeting, the USTR said officials from both sides stressed the importance of their trade alliance and vowed to stay in close touch on the matter. In order for the bill to be amended, however, or even to delay its enforcement for 2 to 3 years, there needs to be approval from both the Senate and House of Representatives. South Korea's efforts to overcome these hurdles will continue, with the Trade Minister's own visit to Washington set for next week. President Yoon Suk-yeol could also try to tackle the issue with his U.S. counterparts at the UN General Assembly in New York next month. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Some of the nation's public corporations at financial risk are set to cut expenses worth tens of billions of dollars. The Finance Ministry designated 14 public institutions based on profitability and financial structure. They include Korea Electric Power Corporation, Korea Land and Housing Corporation, and Korea Railroad Corporation. These institutions announced plans to go on a financial diet over the next 5 years worth $25 billion. This will be done by reducing debt, selling assets, as well as increasing capital and profit. Currently, the debt ratio of the 14 institutions is 345%. But the figure is set to drop to 265% by 2026 if the plan proceeds without setbacks. Starting Saturday, people traveling to South Korea need not be tested for COVID-19 before departure. They'll still have to get tested after arrival. Select restrictions related to family gatherings will be lifted during Chuseok as well. Lee Si-yu fills us in.
From this Saturday, September 3rd, people departing for South Korea will no longer have to take a PCR test before traveling. That's according to the nation's health authorities on Wednesday.
We will stop requiring tests before arrival, going along with the worldwide trend of stopping the need to submit negative test results.
The change applies to both South Korean citizens and non-citizens. Currently, all those arriving must submit negative results of a PCR test taken within 48 hours of arrival or a rapid antigen test taken within 24 hours of arrival before being allowed to enter the country. Then, within 1 day of arrival, they must take an additional PCR test. Such measures have been criticized for the inconvenience and financial burden they put on travelers. While negative COVID-19 test results will no longer be required in order to enter the country, the QR code arrival system will remain, and travelers must still take PCR tests within 1 day of arrival to minimize the spread of COVID-19 variants from overseas. Meanwhile, the government has also decided to introduce in the fourth quarter what are known as bivalent vaccines, which can target both the original COVID-19 strain and certain variants. In this case, it's expected the vaccines offered will target the BA.1 Omicron subvariant and later the BA.4 and BA.5 subvariants. Those over 60 and those with underlying health conditions will have priority in receiving the shots, but adults over 18 who have completed their second shots of the COVID-19 vaccine could also receive the bivalent shots if they wish. SK Bioscience's SKY-CoV-1 vaccine will also start being used from September. COVID-19 restrictions will also be eased for the upcoming Chuseok holiday. Authorities will push to exempt toll fees on highways around the country during the 4-day holiday. There will be no restrictions on family gatherings and visits, and eating will be allowed on buses, trains, and at highway rest areas. At 9 rest areas around the country, COVID-19 test centers will be set up to offer free PCR tests. But in-person visits to nursing homes and facilities where there are many vulnerable people will still be restricted. Meanwhile, South Korea reported 103,961 new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday, around 11,000 fewer than the day before and 35,000 fewer than a week ago. There are currently 569 severely ill patients and there were 75 COVID-related deaths. Lee Si-yu, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Security Advisor plans to discuss ways to cooperate with the U.S. and Japan on implementing the audacious initiative the Yoon administration recently proposed to North Korea. Kim Sung-han made the comments as he left for Hawaii for trilateral talks. He expressed hopes of meaningful discussions as the meeting comes at a time when the security situation on the peninsula is very serious. Officials will have one-on-one talks on Wednesday before all sitting down together on Thursday. Seoul's top diplomats shared the country's concerns over human rights issues in Pyongyang with the newly appointed UN Special Rapporteur for North Korea's human rights. The foreign minister pledged close cooperation, and Elizabeth Salmon expressed gratitude for the country's support. Min Suk-hyun tells us more.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin met with the visiting UN Special Rapporteur for North Korea's human rights, Elizabeth Salmon, this Wednesday afternoon. During their talks, Park said the country was deeply concerned about the human rights situation in North Korea.
And we will proactively cooperate with the international community, including in the United Nations, for promotion and protection of human rights in North Korea. In this regard, we stand ready to provide you with all the necessary support.
He also stressed the government's willingness to take an active role on the issue while mentioning the appointment of South Korea's new ambassador for North Korean human rights.
My government appointed Professor Lee Shin-hwa, who is here with us today, as ambassador for international cooperation on North Korean human rights in July. My government is actively assisting the activities of Ambassador Lee, and we look forward to the close cooperation between you and Ambassador Lee on the North Korean human rights issue.
The UN Special Rapporteur expressed her gratitude for South Korea's strong support and looked forward to their joint cooperation.
And I'm sure that we will work with your help together, building synergies to try to improve the situation of human rights in the DPRK.
Meanwhile, this Friday, Salmon is also scheduled to meet with South Korea's unification minister, Kwon Young-se. She's then expected to hold a press conference later that day to talk about the results of her visit. Her trip comes as the rapporteur seeks to collect information on North Korea's human rights situation for an upcoming report to the UN General Assembly next month. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
As Seoul and Washington hold summertime joint military drills, their combined division held a large-scale field exercise for the first time in a while. This involved live-fire drills in multiple locations near the inter-Korean border and on the East Coast. Bae Eun-ji has the full story.
The South Korea-U.S. Combined Division conducted live-fire field training this week, involving hundreds of troops, mortars, and battle tanks. The South Korean Army announced Wednesday that the Combined Joint Fires Coordination exercise was held for 3 days, starting Monday. It said the Combined Division has been preparing for this drill since the beginning of the year to improve its ability to conduct combined operations, as well as to enhance their interoperability. This was the first and the largest drill held by the division since it was created in January 2015, consisting of units from both of the Allies' armies. The exercise took place at 4 different training locations, including the Rodriguez live-fire complex in Pocheon City, located just south of the heavily fortified demilitarized zone along the border. Wednesday's training in Pocheon involved live-fire training using tanks and mortars, and brought together troops from the Korean Army's 16th Mechanized Infantry Brigade and the 28th Infantry Division, as well as those from the U.S. Rotational Ready First Brigade and the U.S. 7th Air Force. The exercise also took place in Gangneung, where multiple launch rocket systems were fired, and Paju, where a mortar live-fire exercise was conducted.
This is the first time that the South Korea-U.S. Combined Division has conducted a division-level live-fire exercise and worked as a team under a single command structure.
He added that they will continue to strengthen the Allies' combined defense readiness. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
For 2 days from Monday, North Korea held a mass meeting of the commanding officers of the Worker Peasant Red Guards, a paramilitary civil defense force. It was the first such session in about 3.5 years. The state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Wednesday the meeting was convened to enhance the force's operational and combat capabilities and to prepare for the potential need to fight a war of resistance. Kim Jong-un reportedly sent a letter to the participants, but the KCNA did not reveal what it said. The Worker Peasant Red Guards is said to comprise nearly 6 million people. Analysts say the meeting may have been held in response to the ongoing Seoul-Washington joint military drills called Ulchi Freedom Shield. President Yoon Suk-yeol offered his condolences over the passing of Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union's last leader who enabled the Cold War to come to a peaceful end. In a Facebook message on Wednesday, Yoon called Gorbachev a leader who did his best to ensure freedom for the people of Soviet Union and a revolutionary champion. The South Korean leader also described him as a politician who cared about the people and country more than power. According to a statement from the Central Clinical Hospital in Moscow, Gorbachev died after a long illness at age 91. Last month, the government announced plans to transform the former presidential office into an arts and cultural complex. The first step was taken in the form of an exhibition with the work of disabled artists on display. Song Yoo-jin provides a sneak peek.
An exhibition by and for the disabled. From Wednesday, artists with disabilities are showcasing their creations at Cheongwade, or the Blue House, located in central Seoul. It's the first exhibition held at the former presidential office following plans to change it into an art and cultural compound. Here at the exhibition hall located on the second floor of Chuncheon, which used to be the press briefing room, 60 pieces of artwork are on display. They come in a wide variety of genres ranging from Korean art, Western art, and calligraphy to crafts. As of last year, there are 557 disabled artists in South Korea. 50 were selected to have their work on display. The painting Percy Jackson in Math Drawings by Kim Hyun-woo, who has Down syndrome, was temporarily moved from the Yongsan presidential office for the exhibit. Artist and actress Chung Eun-ae, who has the same disability, is also taking part. Not to mention embroiderer Lee Jung-hee, who is an intangible cultural heritage of the Jeollabuk-do province. Visitors can also enjoy pieces by emerging artists.
참여하게 돼서 정말 기쁘고 영광스럽고 정말 감사합니다.
I'm feeling all different kinds of emotions. When Chinwon was young, I was worried that he might not even be able to say the basics like I'm hungry. But he slowly got better and is now showing off his artistic talent and even speaking in front of the camera.
But this exhibit also took visitors with disabilities into consideration. For the visually impaired, there is a brochure in Braille and audio commentary that describes each piece vividly. There is sign language interpretation for those who are hearing impaired and access for people in wheelchairs.
We want to show the general public that disability does not stop people from being an artist. We also hope that disabled artists and their work will be appreciated more.
The exhibition is open every day except Tuesdays until September 19th. Those visiting on the weekend will have a chance to meet the artists in person. Entrance is free of charge and no reservation is needed. 송유진, Arirang News.
The capital region will be able to see clear blue skies again tomorrow. Maximum temperatures will be hiking up to 30 degrees Celsius again. Under such blazing sunshine, UV radiation will also be intense. So do consider wearing a hat or applying sunscreen when heading out. Meanwhile, a powerful typhoon called Hinnamnor is approaching from Okinawa, Japan. As of now, this typhoon is not forecast to pass through South Korea, as there seems to be a higher chance of moving towards the north rather than the west. But even if it doesn't approach the peninsula, the strength of this typhoon is quite powerful, and it may have a direct influence on South Korea. If this is the case, torrential downpours are once again expected, so we will keep you posted with the latest updates. Morning lows in Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 20 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul will be reaching 30 degrees, Chuncheon 29. Daegu and Jeju will be hitting 28 degrees Celsius. The typhoon will be pushing heavy water vapors into our peninsula. Starting on Friday, southern parts of the country will see frequent showers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.
The stage of global urban diplomacy will be Daejeon. UCLG, with 240,000 local governments from 140